I'm Michael Bungay-Stanier. This is Change Signal. This is the podcast where we cut through the blather, the BS, and the noise to find the good stuff that works in change. If you are a transformational leader and you are seeking modern change mastery, well, here is where you'll get the full body checkup to make sure you're in rude health. I hope you've listened to my Change Signal episode with Carolyn Webb. It's fantastic. It's one of the early ones, number 5. And when I asked Carolyn, well, who do you think I should have on the show? Her answer was fast and easy. It was Helen Bevan. Now, Helen has been a force for change, particularly within the NHS and the healthcare systems of the UK. And this is one of those conversations where you'll hear the intertwined wisdom of both robust theory and deep practice coming forward. It was amazing, actually. This conversation made me rethink just what the whole idea of belonging meant in the context of change. And that's just in the first 3 or 4 minutes. So, Helen, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. And I loved my introduction.
Helen, as someone who's been in this game for quite a while now, I'm wondering what's clearer to you now about change than it was, say, 5 years ago?
It's interesting because lots of my practice is very consistent and lots of it is different. Some of the things I think that are different now and that I know much more about now is about the role of belonging and unbelonging in change and just how important building a sense of belonging is. So like whenever I work with a new project team, the first thing that we'll do now is go round and get everybody to tell the story, to find something out about people so that we can build a project team that connects at that level of belonging, like everybody being valued as a member of the team. And I think the most important thing about belonging, that people are appreciated for the unique things they each bring. Building belonging isn't just about assimilation. We want to welcome everybody in the team, but we've all got to think the same. Like true belonging is where we appreciate the differences between people and appreciate what each person brings.
Okay, look, I know it's slightly ridiculous for me to be jumping in just a few minutes into the conversation, but this throwaway line really has me thinking about that slippery slope between belonging and assimilating and co-opting. In some ways they all look the same from the outside, but the internal experience for people is completely different. It's really about that sense of agency. I mean, already we're getting into that perpetually tricky challenge of how do you do change with people, not to people?
If we want to make change happen, it's such an important context. And then another aspect of that, which Deborah Rowland introduced me to, is the idea of unbelonging. And she, with colleagues, did a study with about 3,000 leaders across the world. And what she was trying to find out about was who are the most successful leaders of change. And what she found, again, was that this idea of belonging was at the heart of successful change practice. And when we're in one organizational context and we're doing a big radical transformational redesign and we're going to move people to another team, like the most successful change leaders were able to help people to unbelong as well. So we want a profound sense of belonging, being a high performance team, doing our best with the day-to-day change. And then when the system changes, these leaders can help people to unbelong to one context and then re-belong to another context. I mean, there are lots of other things as well, but I think one practical aspect to think about that's really important, I'd say belonging.
Well, let me ask you about that. Because if I put on my skeptical change person and go, look, Helen, all very touchy-feely, and I'm delighted that you've got everybody holding hands and sharing things that are deep and meaningful to them, but we've got so much stuff to do. Can we not just crack on with it and get stuff done? What does this welcoming and this belonging give the team beyond warm, fuzzy feelings in the moment?
What I'd say, I think another way that my understanding has changed over the last 5 years is around how we have to create the conditions for change, and particularly the relational conditions for change. And again, if I can give you a practical example of this.
Please.
In 2015, our then Secretary of State, Jeremy Hunt, he commissioned an experiment, because he'd been over to the USA and he'd seen a healthcare system called Virginia Mason that was getting the most fantastic outcomes, really great healthcare outcomes, productivity, effective use of resources. And his vision was, we want NHS hospitals to be like that.
Right.
So he came back and he commissioned this experiment where 5 English hospital systems would work with Virginia Mason, and the approach that they used was lean. Okay. So they would have this experiment of whole hospital lean improvement.
When Helen says lean, she's referencing the agile approach to project management. And if you'd like to go deeper on that, episode 10 with John Zaratsky is a fun place to start.
And all 5 of them were supported for 5 years. And they all got exactly the same inputs. All 5 hospitals were getting support, expert support from Virginia Mason. They all got resources to help them to do the change. They were all in a learning set and worked together. And after 5 years, the formal evaluation of the Virginia Mason NHS experiment, it showed that when it came to performance, after the experiment, 3 of the hospital systems had moved forward and had improved their performance, and 2 had gone backwards. Their performance had actually got worse. So what the evaluators wanted to understand was what made the difference.
What's the magic sauce?
And the only factor that they could find was the level of social connection between the people leading the change.
Holy cow. That is amazing.
Yeah, and again, the formal evaluation, which was done by Warwick Business School, and I'd recommend, did organizational network analysis to look at these relationships.
Organizational network analysis? Well, it's a way of mapping how influence and power actually works in organizations. Because, look, we all know the org chart is really just a pleasant fiction. And I'm going to have a future episode going deep into this particular approach.
And if you look at these organizational network graphs of the 3 that moved forward, what you can see is lots of people connecting with each other across silos, lots of learning, sharing, connecting, and knowledge mobilization. But if you looked at the 2 that went backwards, the patterns were very different and they were much more chain-like. And 2/3 of the teams were completely disconnected. And what the evaluation said was, if you looked at the difference, if you like, the ones that went backwards, what you saw there was 100% brokering. Organizations and teams connecting because they have to kind of broker for resources or broker for power. But if you looked at the 3 with the strong connections that moved forward, what you saw there was reciprocity between those teams. And when we think about being reciprocal, it's like you create a win-win through a relationship. And what that evaluation concluded was that if you're going to try and improve a whole system, actually, social capital, which are the relationships and the connections that build a foundation of trust and connectedness, is far more important than human capital, which is about the people in the system and the skills and the capabilities that they've got. Social capital for large-scale change is more important than...
It's not the dots, it's the line between the dots that make the difference.
Yeah, it really matters. So anybody who thinks this pink and fluffy stuff, what's happening more and more now is the science of organizational network analysis is becoming clearer and clearer about the importance of relationships and building relational conditions for any aspect of performance.
That was a pretty persuasive, pretty persuasive shooting me down for the whole touchy-feely stuff. Helen, one of the things that I've been reading that you put out into the world is the way you champion agency.
Yes.
And the importance of agency.
Yes.
I just think this is such a core question to change. And it's so damn hard. Because you can't say to somebody, I'm giving you agency. That is inherently a non-agentic act.
100%, yeah.
Can you coach me or guide me on what you've learned around how do you invite agency? How do you seed agency within your organization? People have capacity to make choices
Yeah.
and act on those choices. And perhaps start even by telling us, when we talk about agency, what are we even talking about here?
Sure. I spent my first 15 years in a formal change role running kind of big programmatic interventions and very much focused on the kind of structures and the processes. And it's what I learned through that work that kind of really pushed me into the direction of championing agency. And it's interesting now, like the word agentic, okay, has really come into our vocabulary over the last kind of couple of years.
Right.
And that's in the context of agentic AI.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we talk about agentic AI, we mean when something is agentic, it means that it can make decisions and work with a high level of autonomy, and it doesn't need prompts and structures. And if we are going to achieve the most that we can achieve as organizations, okay, then we need agentic people as well.
Right.
We need people who feel that they have the control and autonomy to take action and make change happen. And again, there's studies in my world in healthcare improvement, and what they show us is, like, thinking about a change process, people having a sense of agency is more important than having a methodology or skills or even resources, because agency, if you like, it creates the foundation of enabling change. The next thing I would say is having agency is very different to being empowered. And actually, if there was one word that I could ban, and I've got another word I'd ban as well, but it's like, it's in my top two, okay?
All right. What's your other word?
Buy-in.
Buy-in. Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think empower is a ridiculous word.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm the senior leader in this organization and I am empowering you that you can take action. And then as soon as anything changes, like, I'll have it back again.
Yeah.
And the thing about agency is you cannot give people agency. People have to build their own agency. There's so much that we can do as leaders to support that. And a big part of that starts from how we go about making change happen and how we involve people right from the beginning of a change process. Another way that we can support people to grow their own agency is by focusing on very small changes. Very often we think about a healthcare change, we think about changing big processes like a stroke pathway or doing a digital innovation.
Yeah.
But we can make like really small changes, a change that we can try out in a small way that might impact a couple of patients or one colleague. And every time we make a small change, it moves things from being a concept or a principle to something real. And one of the approaches that some organizations in healthcare use that I really love is a principle called Trojan mice.
I love that.
Okay.
I saw that in your writing, Trojan horses versus Trojan mice. And
yeah.
just the idea of these tiny little wooden mice sneaking in with some sort of change catalystness built with inside it sounds perfect to me.
Yeah. And the thing about doing that is that it's a routine, in a sense that it's something you build into an organization, that you train up and support and help people have agency across the organization, so that every time you've got a new change coming, you can get this group of people to try it out in small ways. And what we find is that having a few Trojan mice around the organization who've got agency, who've got improvement skills, trying things out, does far better than Trojan horses, which are big pilot and rollout projects. So that's the thing about agency, that even though we say it's about people need to grow their own agency, as change leaders, we can create systems and routines that enable it and make it day to day.
Helen's a prolific and helpful poster on LinkedIn, so I really strongly encourage you to follow her there. And you'll also find her on Twitter. I'm not going to say X, at least for a while. It's at Helen Bevan, all one word. I want to ask you around how you help people who are leading become comfortable with this idea of people having agency throughout their organization. Because like in theory, I love the idea of people having agency. In practice, what the hell's happening out there? I don't know. I've lost control. I've lost line of sight. How am I going to micromanage anybody who has agency? The two don't even exist. So How do you help senior folk in a kind of small s, small f, kind of just go, here's how you sit with less control, more ambiguity, more uncertainty, less kind of micromanagerial kind of minutiae that you might otherwise have had?
I think that there are multiple ways of going about this, because if you've got a senior leader who thinks that micromanagement is the way forward and has got fixed views and patterns, I think there's no point. But I don't think that most senior leaders think like that. If I think about senior leaders who, aren't delegating when they clearly could,
Yep.
the problem isn't that they don't know they should be delegating. Okay. The problem is that they're having to deal day to day with the implications of not having delegated. So
Right.
there's no time or space
You're in a vicious
for
circle.
doing
Yeah.
things differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that most senior leaders that I get to work with are up for
Right.
enabling some change. And I think what gets in the
That's so
way
helpful to hear.
is fear.
Just to slow this down a moment, because we tend to rush through fear. It's a biological response. But if one of the roots of resistance is fear, and it so often is, what are they? Pick whatever stakeholder you want to be your they. Might be your team, might be your boss, might be the people. But what are they afraid of? And I'd start by asking, what are you afraid of? Take a moment to be with that, because what does that then tell you about what fear might be in the system? Because
I think a lot of the time it's not the people, it's the system. And that's where we need to focus. And again, another person whose work I love, who's a kind of on the same wavelength as me, is Greg Sattle. And Greg wrote an amazing book called Cascades, which is about bringing social movement thinking into organizations. And he says, if you look at like the history of transformation and how radical change happens, it's small groups of people, loosely connected, but with shared values and shared purpose coming together. So very often, if I'm leading an intervention or I'm working with people at a certain level in an organization, I'll say to them, like you can write all the business cases in the world and nobody's going to take any notice. Okay. Who are the people in the organization who think the same way that you do? Who could your allies be?
Right.
What could we trial in a small way? And then we build it from there. And I think that kind of approach tends to be much more successful, except that we're in a world where the currency is business cases and people spend, hours and hours and hours writing business cases that very often go nowhere. So other tactics, I'd say, is there are many leaders in my system, amazing leaders who get it already, who are working in different kinds of ways. Help those people to be the role models, shine a light on them and their practice. Because again, network science shows us that a senior leader who has got a £20 million financial deficit is not going to listen to me. Okay.
Right.
Like change happens and people are influenced peer to peer. We need to work with the leaders, the senior leaders who are working in different ways, get them to influence others. And just to flip what you asked me, a situation that I experience a lot are people like middle managers and frontline managers and clinicians who feel that they've got no sense of agency and they want the organization to change. And the problem is, if they want the organization to change, they may have very long wait. And we have to get on with doing our own things. And very often, like a frontline leader, a ward manager, a clinical leader will say to me, oh, Helen, I can see all kinds of opportunities for improvement in my area, but I'm not allowed. I haven't got permission. And so I'll kind of encourage them to try things out in a small way. And their boss loves it. They think it's marvelous. So we've got all kinds of weird assumptions of people won't let you do things or things have to happen in certain ways. All of us have got agency.
Partly
We
it's
just
just a
have to
moment of
take
realizing it. It's right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're reminding me of the change framework around positive deviancy and appreciative inquiry, which is like, look, there's good stuff already happening. How do we find that and amplify that and say to people, look at this?
Yeah.
And those places where the good stuff is already happening, it's often people who've gone, look, it's easier to apologize than to explain. I'm just going to
Exactly.
start doing some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And some of it will work and some of it won't work. And the stuff that doesn't work probably is okay. We'll figure out a way to kind of move beyond it. And the stuff that does work will catch people's attention and potentially spread.
Yeah. I would say the number one rule of being a change agent is you can't be a change agent on your own.
Right.
And however clever or creative you are, when you're part of a big system, like the kind of systems I work with, if you try and do things on your own in an isolated way, you get crushed. That's the other thing about agency. You can have individual agency, but I think the most powerful kind of agency is collective agency. I run a school. I set the school up with other fantastic people in 2014, and it's called the School for Change Agents. And nearly 100,000 people have been through that
Amazing.
School now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people like best about the school is the kind of person who is attracted to come to the School for Change Agents is somebody who, wants to challenge the status quo, feels a bit powerless, feels like a bit of an oddball because they think differently to other people. They come to the School for Change Agents and they find a whole load
There's
of
lots of other people who are just like me.
them.
Yeah.
And it's so liberating. It's like the best thing about the School for Change Agents that people tell us. And the great thing is that those people are in your organization as well.
Right.
We just have to find them, make the time to find the other people, the fellow spirits, and try some things out together.
Let me ask you about power, which is intrinsically woven into this whole conversation that we've been having around agency.
Yes.
What do I need to understand about power if I am or if I aspire to be a change agent?
I like to quote Bertrand Russell, the father of modern logic, and he defines power as the ability to make intended outcomes happen.
Nice.
As change agents, we have to focus on power. And one of the frameworks that I find really helpful, and I've been working with for over a decade now, is Old Power, New Power, which is Hyman and Tim's 2014 Harvard Business Review. And what they differentiate between is old power, which is about formal authority in organizations and systems, and it's pushed down. You have to do this. You have to take this action because it's part of your role in the organization. And it's about structures and systems and processes and accountability mechanisms, okay? All really important things.
Yeah.
And then if we contrast that with new power is the kind of power that we build through collective agency. So when people come together with common goals and common values, the more people that engage in our initiative or our campaign or our movement, the more power that we have. And going right the way back to earlier in this conversation, new power is about relationships. It's about how people connect, because one of the big differences between old power and new power is that people will engage in a new power way because they want to, because the cause that we are moving towards fits with their own agenda and the things that matter to them. But the thing about new power, because it's so relationally based, you can't just dip your toe in the water and then think, I don't like it, and run away from it.
Right.
It's something you have to commit to.
Partly I'm thinking, if I'm trying to build this new power and it's relational, partly I'm also looking at old power and kind of a hierarchy and who holds influence and who holds resource and who's a gatekeeper and all of that.
Yeah.
If I feel less senior and I'm looking to build relationships with people with more senior, how do I get the courage to do that? If I don't really know the hierarchy of the medical world, but let's say if I'm a junior nurse and I'm looking at a surgeon and going, that surgeon could be a brilliant ally.
Yeah.
How do I even think about approaching somebody like that?
It can be tricky. And again, the research shows us that one of the biggest barriers to psychological safety and building the conditions for change is power gradient. It's a massive issue in my world and in many other worlds, because there's no way that a junior staff nurse will talk to a senior surgeon. It's never, and it isn't about an individual having the courage, But as a junior staff nurse, you can think about, what do I want to change? Where are the opportunities
Right.
for improvement? And I start off by working with some of my peers.
Right.
And then get a little bit of courage. And then there's 3 or 4 of us that think the same. So then we'll have the multidisciplinary team with the surgeons and the clinicians. And like me on my own wouldn't dare to bring it up. But now there's 3 or 4 of us that think the same. And we agree that collectively that we're going to. So then we bring it into the team.
Nice.
And it happens bit by bit. And the other thing I'd say is, like, some people are quite judgmental and they think like old power bad, new power good. I don't think like that at all. I think, like in my world, to succeed, you have to respect and appreciate and work with both.
What needs to be said in this conversation that hasn't yet been said?
A key way forward is building for emergence. And too often, because we want change we want to have a level of certainty, we design change in a very linear way with a goal and milestones and checklists.
Yeah.
Like when I think about healthcare and the whole shift, we are moving away from hospital systems and structures to neighborhood health in communities, which means, we have to work with so many different people. So it isn't just about other healthcare professionals or healthcare leaders.
Right.
We have to work with local government. We have to work with community leaders. Citizens. And when you're working in that way with a very diverse group of people, and you're truly doing it in a way where you're giving people voice and you're co-creating a different future, you cannot specify what the outcome's going to be and what the milestones are and plan it in a linear way. What we have to do is build fantastic change conditions and give people agency and have good processes, that will enable change to emerge. So it's very process driven, but it's not a process that is about, this is the process to get to this exact outcome with these milestones. It's a process around actually building the conditions at the beginning of a change process that will allow the best outcome to emerge.
Right.
It's very scary, I think, for a lot of formal leaders, but it's where we need to go.
I do love it when I'm speaking to someone who has that bone deep wisdom about how change in a system works. I mean, I have a feeling that if I was personally leading a transformational project right now, I'd regularly be asking WWHD, what would Helen do? Thanks for the love you give this podcast, by which I really mean thanks for taking the time to listen to it to the end. That is generous of you. And it delights me that these episodes are proving so helpful to so many of you. If you want to do more, well, a review or a post on LinkedIn or even a mention to a colleague of yours, that's all above and beyond and all are most welcome. More, as ever, is findable at thechangesignal.com. Thanks for doing the work. I'm glad you're here.